Greetings and welcome to WBGO's panel discussion on Gospel, the latest history series from literary scholar, journalist, cultural critic, executive producer, and host, Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. Gospel premieres in two parts on your local PBS station Monday, February 12th and Tuesday, February 13th. From blues to hip hop, African Americans have been the driving force of sonic innovation for a century. Musical styles come and go, but there is one sound that has been a constant source of strength, courage, and wisdom from the pulpit to the choir lofts on any given Sunday. The Gospel. Gospel is a four-part docuseries that explores the rich history of Black spirituality through sermon and song, showcasing the symbiotic relationship of words and song in any Black church. Since the time of sorrow songs, Black sacred music was a cathartic and confidential way to communicate the anger and frustration of living as a Black person in America. Even in the 21st century, gospel continues to evolve and remains a source of cultural affirmation and sustenance, bringing an enduring tradition into the future. My name is Leslie Harrison, host of Come Sunday, a gospel show on WBGO. I am thrilled to moderate today's panel with our esteemed guests. First, we have one of the series producers and directors, Shayla Harris. She has collaborated with Professor Gates on several PBS series, including The Black Church. This is our story. This is our song. Welcome, Shayla. And also want to welcome the ever so dapper Dr. William Howard. He's no stranger to us here at WBGO. He is a community leader, community and a business leader, and he is the former pastor of Bethany Baptist Church, established in 1871 as the first Baptist church founded by African Americans in Newark, New Jersey. We also have with us Dr. Lori D. Hartman, the first female pastor of Brooklyn's James United Methodist Church in its 163 years of serving the Bedford-Stuyvesant community and beyond. She is an accomplished vocalist and the daughter of one of the greatest jazz singers ever, Johnny Hartman. And to round out our panel, we have Charlotte Small, an accomplished vocalist who has worked with house music legends Barbara Tucker and Louis Vega. Charlotte currently teaches gospel chorus and gospel ensemble at the New School in New York City. She is also married to jazz and gospel pianist Cyrus Chestnut. Welcome, everyone, to WBGO's panel on gospel. Let's begin this discussion with you, Shayla Harris. Why this subject and what made you want to participate in telling this story?
Thanks so much for having me and for supporting the series. We're very excited to finally have this project out in the world. We've been working on it since February 2022, so it's been a labor of love. But as you mentioned, this is the second or third project that I've worked with Professor Gates, or Skip as we affectionately call him. And the Black Church series was really one of the first that we collaborated on. And that came out during COVID and really resonated with folks at that time. And because the series got such a great response and was really focused just on the institution of the church, there were all these things on the cutting room floor. There were all these stories that we couldn't really talk about. When you start these projects, you think, oh my God, how am I going to fill 4 hours of television? And then at the end, you're like, we need 4 more hours. So Dr. Gates decided and raised the money to make this second series possible, which we are calling Black Church the Musical, because it's focusing on the soundtrack of Black spirituality and the double helix of gospel music and Black preaching that, as W.E.B. Du Bois called it, the preacher, the music, and the frenzy are the foundation of the Black church. So, we delved into exploring these two art forms and where they emerged, and the Big Bang moment in Chicago during the Great Migration, all the way up to gospel second century in the present day in 2022. So it's been a remarkable journey to learn about this project and to meet and experience some of this rich music and history. And we're so excited to have it finally out in the world.
Thank you, Shayla. I'll direct this next question both to you, Dr. Howard and Dr. Hartman. Talk about the role of sound in the Black religious experience, if you will.
Okay, Hartman, let's go.
What is the role of music in the Black church?
Well, I think the role of music in the Black church is as a connector. It connects us spiritually to our faith, to our experience in God, but also to each other. So the shared experience through the lyrics, through the expression, through the phrasing of the music, um, you know, it's something that connects people together, and they can have a common story. So I think that that's very important, and we can wrap a sermon around it, but really, most people really do connect through the sound of the music and the expression, the hand clapping, and just engrossing themselves in the song.
Dr. Howard?
I'd say, music is integral to Black life. I mean, it's simply, the church is one more expression of that. But if you could hear some of the singing in the cotton field, as I did as a child in Georgia, you'll know, I mean, music is rooted, no doubt, in the African experience or the African identity. And you see that in the church in a very robust way because, it's connected to faith. And when we talk about Dorsey later, notice he was actually Georgia Tom, a blues singer before. And Bethany, Leslie, I say, the blues and jazz are the same, except one talks about the deity and the other does not. I mean, gospel and jazz. Gospel talks about the deity, jazz does not. So I think Reverend Hartman is correct. No doubt, the music is integral to churches, but it is really integral to Black life, I would say.
And so tell me, what does gospel music mean to you, Charlotte, as a vocalist and as a teacher?
Well, gospel music is my heart. It is, I believe, the heartbeat of America. I believe that it is, I know as a teacher, I have many students that are not Black or of African American descent that desire to study gospel music. But what I find is that when they come in, they know nothing about this music, but it pulls at their heartstrings in such a way that it's just incredible to see. And they have no relationship with God, most of the students that come in, but it changes them in such a way. And a lot of them, I feel, need healing. And that is what it does. Our music, that is what it does. We have so much pain within us from that we are still carrying. And what I see is that this music, it is a healer for me. But as I'm teaching students and they come in and they know nothing about it, by the time they're done with the semester, they have learned so much and they have healed so much within themselves. And I think that that's what our culture, where we have such a rich culture and so much to share. So that's what gospel does for me. It, the pain that we go through each and every day, we have pain, but then gospel music brings us and gives us hope. And so that's what I've seen. That's what it's done for me. And that's what it's done for my students.
Right. The global impact also of gospel music is amazing. The amount of people who listen to Come Sunday who have no connection with the Black church, but also you go to jazz festivals around the world, there's always one or two gospel choirs that will steal the show. So
Right.
it's wonderful to know that students are coming from all parts of the globe to get a piece of gospel music.
Yes.
My next question is for you, Shayla. What are you worked on the Black church, and there are some overlapping themes and topics. What is something new that you learned in making this film that you didn't know when working on the Black church?
That's a great question. One of the things that there are a couple of things that I didn't know, but one of the key things that I didn't know was the incredible role of women in sort of putting pushing gospel to the forefront. Thomas Dorsey is, sort of labeled as the godfather of gospel, and, wrote some really seminal songs like Precious Lord, Take My Hand. But a lot of people wouldn't have known about Dorsey if there wasn't Sally Martin, who was out there plugging his songs, building his publishing business. She really turned that idea of selling sheet music and making gospel profitable, not necessarily commercial, but profitable at that time, and helping him sustain his artistry and his ministry through music. And so, for me and my co-director, Stacey Holman, like the role of women, particularly Black women, who, as we know, make up a large percentage of the Black church and have formed the foundation and the backbone of the church, have been really pivotal in and helping this art form grow, and certainly folks like Mahalia Jackson, who is a central figure, helped bring gospel to international renown with her work in TV and radio and all that stuff, which was not something that I knew about. I just thought like, oh, she's a singer, she has some records out. But, at a time in the 50s, Mahalia Jackson was on radio, on television, on the Ed Sullivan Show, which at the time, in the midst of Jim Crow, was not something that was really common. So learning those things was really, really important context to kind of understanding how this art form really grew.
Right. And tell us, and maybe this is maybe for Dr. Howard and Dr. Hartman, and anyone, please feel free to join in. In what ways does the evolution of gospel music tell the history of the Black church?
Let me just say that don't forget, Shayla, Edna Galman Cook and Sister Rosetta Tharpe, because down in deep Georgia, where I was, they came through town back in the days of segregation. They performed on what we call euphemistically the chitlin circuit. And these were the women we associated, even in some ways, before gospel blossomed and became better known. And it should also be said, Leslie, that we're really talking about so-called Black gospel. Because if you research the history of this music, Europeans claim a gospel music, but it is not the same genre as we know. And of course, we knew the music at the grassroots through the gospel quartets, right? Leslie, you know this stuff, and the gospel quartets. Now, of course, being the preacher that I am, I'm off subject. Tell me again your question. And
I was asking.
Very brief, but...
No, that's fine. That's fine. In what ways has the evolution of gospel? How does the evolution of gospel music tell the history of the Black church?
I'm not sure, frankly. Now, keep in mind that the Black church per se, Shayla, resisted this quote unquote new music, because in the old style Baptist church, you had some spirituals, you had the National Baptist Hymnal. So gospel in the Baptist church was a kind of foreign introduction. Reminded me a lot of when we introduced jazz in Bethany. And then gospel now is mainstreamed in the church, but it is not exactly a smooth kind of relationship, right? And now that gospel has become more contemporary, more commercial, it separates the churches.
Mm.
You have the neo-Pentecostal churches that are more warmed to the Yolanda Adams kind of gospel, Andre Crouch kind of gospel, but you also have traditional churches that still haven't reconciled their relationship to the continuing evolution of gospel music itself. And don't forget, the record labels now have impacted, and the commercialization of the music has impacted the spiritual dimension of the music. I'll stop there.
Dr. Hartman?
Yes, I would say, I was thinking when you talked about the history of the European history of gospel music, because there, they say that Amazing Grace was really one of the first gospel songs, and there was a book that was published by a European composer called, I'm going to look at here, it was called Gospel Songs, a choice collection of hymns and tunes in 1874 by Philip Bliss. And when I'm Methodist, so we sing hymns in church. So our faith story is wrapped around these hymns that we sing. So they're European based, but they speak to the culture that's singing them, but it also speaks to the church culture. So for us being a predominantly African American and Caribbean, African Caribbean church, we put a little spice on our hymns, on our European hymns, and we also sing some Negro spirituals as well. But our traditional United Methodist hymnal, that's prefaced by John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, I just wanted to share with you. This was written, I guess, in the 1700s. He has some directions for singing in the beginning of the hymnal. And he says that you should learn these hymns, these tunes, before you learn any others. And then you can learn whatever you want. But sing these exactly as they're printed. Sing all the songs, but sing them lustily and with good courage. Mm-hmm. Sing them modestly. Don't bawl to try to be heard above everybody else. And sing in time. Whenever time is sung, sing it in time. But above all else, sing all spiritually. Have an eye to God in every word you sing, and aim to pleasing him more than yourself. And so we take these, of course, we didn't sing them all in the same time, and we didn't sing them exactly the way they were written, but we sang them with our own emotion and our own experience that spoke to what our experiences were being played out at the time. So with the evolution of these traditional hymns being sung and then spiced up by what people were actually experiencing as our European churches became more Black, because the Methodist Church, we're not AME, but we're Methodist, and so we kind of evolved into a Black congregation, and so we see the history sung in the hymns themselves. When you think about Lift Every Voice and Sing, that speaks to the history of the struggle of civil rights. So I think that it's like the what do you call it? The movie soundtrack. It's almost like the soundtrack for the evolution of the Black church through the evolution of the gospel music as well.
Yeah.
Well, Leslie, a Newark resident, Dr. Nell Payne, great historian and authority on Sojourner Truth, is writing a new book, and she and I were talking about how to unpack the mystic nature of Sojourner Truth. She was very much a woman of the spirit, and Nell was looking for biblical passages to explain certain expressions. And I said, well, you may not find that in the Bible, but if you go to an old Methodist hymnal, you may. Methodist hymnals are not notorious. They are wonderful resources for understanding really the American Christian faith. And a lot of African Americans, we accuse white people of appropriating our art. But the truth is, we take those Methodist hymns and turn them into a whole new thing.
Absolutely.
Is that right, Reverend? I think that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's exactly
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, it is.
It's the good news of Jesus Christ in song, and it speaks to the Christian life, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me
And look,
say,
let me say, Sister Small gave her
Yes.
testimony there a minute ago, and her husband told me once when he first went to Howard, he was a
Mm-hmm.
little frustrated because he had brilliant music students, but
Right.
they knew nothing about church music. And
Yes.
he thought that was really a disadvantage as they approached what we call jazz. So you
Yes.
see, the continuum is amazing. And when you hear "Dear God" Coltrane, it's like, how do you divide this? It's the Black
Mm-hmm.
experience
mhm,
overlaid with the perspective of the deity, meaning their commitment to Jesus Christ, but they don't know they're singing Johnny Hartman. They don't even realize.
No. Yeah.
So I see it that way, and you see a lot of young people are talking about hip hop and how it connects to the faith. And I do think that the gospel music, Black gospel, is really a derivative of the ancient groans
mm.
of enslaved Africans, you know?
Well, speaking of hip hop and different genres where gospel music shows up, I'm a big fan of house music. And Charlotte, you have worked with one of the greatest producers in house music, Louis Vega. And I have a portion of the show on Come Sunday that I kind of dedicate last half hour to gospel house music.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about your role in house music and how in the evolution of house music and
Well, right
gospel
now
music
with
and house music.
well, I've been doing house music, oh my gosh, for years. From way back in the 90s with Barbara Tucker. And
Mhm.
right now, currently, we have a group called the B Crew. And the music that we are actually singing is actually pretty much on the gospel house
Mhm.
sound. And a lot of the music that we're doing is very inspirational. And I've never been one to take I would say gospel music into the clubs or that's never been my thing. But I will say that the music that we're singing, the inspirational, the writing that we're doing, If It Wasn't for Your Grace is one of the songs that we've written together. Music Remedy is the healing for the world. That's another title of the song. It is very important, and we're also taking it into the churches where we've been doing it there as well. So it is very important, and I believe that gospel and all of this music is intertwined together. It also is a way to reach younger people, the youth. I think that what we're doing helps the youth to understand more of where our music comes from, and it draws them in. I can also speak to when I was on staff at Abyssinian and what Dr. Howard was saying of how the music has changed and how we only sang. Abyssinian was very rigid initially, even up until 2008, and we only did anthems, and we didn't have drums in the church or anything like that. And then finally we started to have a full band in church and have drums and all of that, whereas before it would be just the pipe organ, and they were very, very rigid about that, and singing just spirituals and anthems and not too much of the contemporary gospel music. But with house music, what we're doing, what I've been doing gospel house for years, and it is a way, I believe, to reach the youth. I think that the churches now have to begin to not be as rigid and as square, because that's one of the reasons why younger people aren't coming into the churches and are shying away. So house music, I think, even rap music, there are gospel rap artists, those are other things that are bringing in and tying in our youth, and we need to find ways to do that. the old way isn't working for younger people. Sometimes I think that younger people should have an interest in the older way, in the old ways, and study out those things, study out our history. But we have to find a way to draw younger people in. And I believe that house music is music that draws everyone in.
Mm-hmm.
It also isn't a music that is necessarily recognized, I think, all of the time. It's not given the respect that it should be given. But it's coming. It's coming. I see it moving forward. I see it coming. But a lot of I could think of so many gospel house artists. Kenny Bobian is a gospel house artist. There are tons of people that sing gospel house. Dawn Tallman, who sings with me with the B Crew as well. And we've been doing this for years. So all of this music, again, it's all Black music. It all comes from Africa. It all starts with the drum. That's where it comes from. It starts with the drum, the history of the drum. I think my husband always says the drum is the thing that unifies us. It starts there, and then we build. So it's very important. I love all types of music, but I think that everything, jazz, house, R&B, it's all tied in to gospel, all of it. It's
Leslie, what Charlotte Small is telling us really is that our music from the beginning has been evolving. And very often we get stuck with the music of our generation. But the truth is, it has always been. Look, I grew up on meter hymns, for God's sake. You know, who knows about that anymore? It was sustaining in that time, and probably still for some people. But the music has been evolving, and it will continue to evolve. I had a question from a Bethany member this week, wanting to know, she had watched the Grammys, and she enjoyed the show. But she heard her contemporaries being critical because of the different young people. And I said, look, I'm stuck into bebop. That's me. I'm 70 plus years old, but I'm quite happy that young people have discovered a soul inspiring music for them. And then every now and then I'll listen to Talib Kweli or some other young person, who's not denigrating women and praising money. Those are my standards. But by and large, I think we should be comfortable knowing that the music is not going to be stuck in precious lore, although, and by the way, the church itself, Charlotte, I know Abyssinian fairly well. Let me just say, the church today is the civil rights church.
Yes.
But we're not in the civil rights era anymore.
No.
So that's going to be the interesting challenge, Reverend Hartman, to respecting the civil rights era, but we're in some other kind of era now, on the verge of fascism, So let's be comfortable with house music, hip hop. And if young people can know a little bit about lining hymns, that's all to go,
Recently I was at Dr. Hartman's church, James United. I did one of your jazz festivals, and I remember picking up the hymnal, and there was "Come Sunday," Duke Ellington's epic piece. And I'm thinking, well, look at that. "Come Sunday" has made it into a hymnal.
Yes, because because now they've created the new Baptist GIA publications. They've added all of these songs into the hymnals now, so that it's completely different. It's completely changed. They've added all these songs that were not there into the hymnals. So "Come Sunday's" in there. There's so many. I have to pull it out, but there's a ton of new things that are in the hymnals now.
Great. And the truth is, these musicians have never been as leery about the church as the church has been about them.
Yeah.
I mean, when Wycliffe Gordon Or better yet, let's take Liz Wright.
Mhm.
Liz came out of Vienna, Georgia, which is like 20-some miles from where I grew up. And when she performed at Bethany, her father came to hear her. This was the first time her father had heard her sing jazz. She grew up in the church, deeply connected to church music, quote unquote. But finally, she was doing this in a church, and her father came all the way to New Jersey to hear her sing this music at the altar. And at a certain point during the performance, she invited her father to come up and sing with her. And of course, they sang one of these old time, whatever, it was sort of like Keep Your Lamp Trimmed and Burning. Somebody knows that song. And the church was standing on its feet. And I'm trying to figure out, what is the distinction? What is the distinction? We have allowed the record labels and our own closed minds to make radical distinctions. And that's something we should help to raise awareness about and to fight against. Because when Liz and her father were singing, it was a profoundly spiritual moment, not just because they were singing beautifully, but the presumed separation had been reconciled.
We've been talking a lot about the music, and Dr. Howard, unfortunately, I have never heard you preach a sermon. I heard a little bit of Dr. Hartman. Please tell me what distinguishes Black preaching from other religious traditions. Is it the style or is it the substance? Now, I'm a preacher's granddaughter, a Methodist CME in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I have fond memories of it was Colored Methodist, yes.
That's right.
Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, St. John's in Winston-Salem. But I remember just some of the musical, the preaching itself was just musical and moving, and it kind of morphed from the choir, the spiritual choir, to the preacher. Tell me a little bit about what you think distinguishes Black preaching from other religious traditions. Dr. Hartman.
Lori, I'm looking now.
Are you looking?
What are you going to say?
Oh, I'm United Methodist, so I was glad she asked a Baptist preacher that question.
Well, no. Did you hear that? She's United Methodist, but she's going to ask a Baptist preacher. That makes my point, Reverend Hartman.
Yes.
The problem that we have is we presume that Black preaching is the same across the board. So I'm going to put my hat on content, because I've known some of the great preachers, from Samuel DeWitt Proctor to Gardner Taylor to, Who Shot John, they might have different styles, but they bring a message that is uplifting and stirring hope among the congregants. And I think that this notion of the caricature of a Black preacher with a big white handkerchief running across the pulpit, sweating, and saying, actually many times saying nothing, is a misnomer. Because you have preachers who hoop and make people shout, but in fact, they have a wonderful core message. Dr. Charles Adams from Hartford Baptist Church in Detroit, known as the Harvard Hooper, okay? He just passed away very recently. Charles Adams would give you something really profound in his message, but he had a style that was riveting. But J. Alfred Smith, you just go across the board. Great Black preachers have different styles. And by the way, they honor each other for their different approaches. But somehow the caricature, when you go on TV and you see Flip Wilson's what's happening now, church. You got to be a certain age to even know who that is, right? It's a caricature by people interested in money, and it's not representative. And you've got United Methodist churches that also have spirited preaching,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So let's be clear about the diversity of people. You know, my approach, by the way, is humor. You know, when I give sermons, you're going to laugh at least one time during that sermon. And I believe in irony as a part of the message. And I don't believe in sweating and tiring myself out because I have something else to do after church. Okay.
What about you, Lori?
I think it's content too, but it's also the delivery that people are connecting to as well. They hear the rhythm of the timbre of the speaking, and it speaks to, oh, this is gospel too. They think of that as part of the extension of gospel music as well. But the message is the most important thing, I believe, and that could come across. But I think also that the Pentecostal preachers are the ones that people associate a lot with a lot of expression in a way, that they want to like bring it home as well. We had recently Congressman Hakeem Jeffries here as a guest speaker, and I was expecting, and he's out of Cornerstone. I think it's Cornerstone Baptist Church, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
He's out of Cornerstone, and so when he came in, I was expecting, political, presentation, something really tight. But he preached. I mean, he broke it down, and I was like, whoa. So he connected with the choir, he connected with everything, which I think is what you're saying, Leslie, is that it's like a whole picture of connecting. On Sundays, because Leslie came to our jazz service, but on Sundays we do is a little bit more more in depth in that. But I'm not a hooper and a hollerer. I'm more of a content based preacher as well.
But let me make a recommendation to you all. Please find YouTube videos or whatever of Prathia Hall. Find those videos, because she represents, in my opinion, the finest of our preaching. And she's passed away much too young, but she's got those videos up there somewhere. And if you can find something by Prathia Hall, you have the cream of what we produce in preaching.
Great. Thank you. A question for you, Shayla. How do you break down the history of gospel into 4 episodes?
It's a lot of arm wrestling about what goes in and what isn't included. But, we actually started the clock a little bit later. Like when you work with an esteemed scholar like Professor Gates, he always wants to begin at the beginning, which for him is when we arrived on the ships. And for documentaries, there isn't a lot of like audio and video from that period. So it makes it really hard to tell a really robust, immersive story. So for this project, we, didn't want to start with the spirituals or start with, those hymns, but really wanted to start with the birth of gospel, where you see this amalgamation of the spirituals and the sacred music with blues and jazz and contemporary sounds that happened in the Great Migration in places like Chicago and in Detroit. And so we started there, and we see how these migrants like Thomas A. Dorsey and Sally Martin and Mahalia Jackson come to Chicago. They're all meeting. They're all contemporaries, which is pretty crazy to realize that all these fantastic people all just happen to be in the same place at the same time, creating this magnificent art form. So we kind of trace the evolution from there, spend the first episode in Chicago, and then see how the sound kind of spreads and moves in places like Detroit, where you have this sort of cross-pollination between, the music minister of New Bethel Baptist and James Cleveland, who comes from Chicago and brings that sound to Detroit, working with Reverend C.L. Franklin, who is the hooper, the master hooper, the man with the $1 million voice, who was incredibly influential in recording his sermons. And, you know, you can still see a lot of his stuff on YouTube. I think that's why he's one of the most imitated pastors there are out there. And just trying to see how he's leveraging platforms like records, like the radio, to spread the gospel, both in preaching and in music, because he really supported music. And we certainly see that with his influence over his daughter, Aretha Franklin. So we kind of chart that development in episode 2, and certainly what's happening in parallel politically and socially with the civil rights movement, which really merges those two art forms, both preaching and the singing, Black gospel, into the soundtrack of the Black freedom struggle, and brings these sounds to a wider public, you know, brings it outside of the 4 walls of the church. And by the time we get to the 3rd hour, gospel has gone really exploded with Oh Happy Day, which comes out of the Pentecostal church. You know, they, like everyone who innovated gospel, was doing the devil's music. And so they, you know, they're embracing all kinds of different kinds of sounds. And we see also in places like Detroit with, and in the Pentecostal space in the Kojic church, all of these new innovations in the music, with folks like the Mattie Moss Clark and the Clark sisters, and how they're bringing in incredible harmonies and different sounds from disco and funk and reggae into their gospel music. And finally, we get to, you know, the South, and in episode 4, exploring how hip hop starts to influence both the musicians and artists like Kirk Franklin and the Yolanda Adams, and that new generation of gospel artists, as well as the sweating preachers of the mega church, like Bishop T.D. Jakes and all those folks who are, you know, preaching the word to amphitheaters full of people, much different than some of the folks that we started with in episode 1. And finally end with the sort